So I love the Ori games, some of the best Metroidvania action we've gotten in recent years. And now, it seems I have a whole new reason to love them, or at least the developers behind them. The creative director over at Moon Studios, Thomas Mailer, put out a post on Reset Era the other day just thrashing people who completely overhype and even lie about their games leading up to release, as well as how so many people seem to just give these studios a pass for these practices. I thought it was phenomenal, so today I wanted to take a look at it, read some of it, and discuss it. To start off, he says, quote, "It all started with Molyneux. He was the master of, instead of telling you what my product is, let me just go wild with what I think it could be and get you all excited. And that was fine until you actually put your money down, and then the game was nothing like what Peter was hyping it up to be. He pulled this shit for a good decade or more, with journalists and gamers loving listening to Uncle Peter and the amazing things he's doing for the industry. It took him to release some pretty damn shoddy games for press and gamers to finally not listen to the lies anymore." So true. If you're not familiar with Peter Molyneux, I know his prominence was probably before some of your guys' time. This is something he was super famous for. People on his development teams have said that he'd be doing like an E3 presentation or something for a game and start talking about crazy features they've never even discussed. His most famous BS demo was probably the Milo thing with Kinect. That was a classic, claiming he had this fully functioning AI kid that you could have conversations with, interact with through the Xbox Kinect. You could even like scan items with the Kinect and hand them to him in real time, and he'd react to them and you could discuss them.
Right, I'm gonna do a body and a tail with a big fin and a smiley face. There we go. What do you think?
Look at what just happened.
Orange.
Claire drew a picture on a piece of paper. The piece of paper was held up to Milo. Natal recognized the piece of paper, scanned the piece of paper in.
Shockingly, we never saw anything with Milo beyond the initial showcase. In terms of games, the one that always comes to mind for me is Fable 3. That was supposed to be this insanely huge game, all these crazy features with like building the city, as well as your relationships with all the NPCs in the world. And I think, personally, like Fable 1 and 2 were fantastic. He has made some great games, but it's like, yeah, just over-promising the world and completely under-delivering with Fable 3. He did it in such spectacular fashion, it killed the franchise dead pretty much for like a decade. So Mailer goes on. Then came Sean Murray, who apparently had learned straight from Peter Molyneux's handbook. This guy apparently loved the spotlight. Even days before No Man's Sky release, he hyped up the multiplayer that didn't even exist and was all too happy to let people think that No Man's Sky was Minecraft in space, where you could literally do everything. You being able to do everything, I love this, is generally a common theme behind the gaming snake oil salesman. That sort of attracts everybody. Obviously, there was massive backlash when No Man's Sky finally released, and the product being nothing like what Murray hyped it up to be. But what happened then? They released a bunch of updates, so let's forget about the initial lies and deception, and hey, let's actually shower him with awards again, because he finally kinda sorta delivered on what he said the game would be like years earlier. Thanks, Jeff Keighley. Rewarding that kind of behavior will surely help the industry grow stronger. God, this is some based gamer shit. Yeah, I mean, no man's lie, I don't think anyone's gonna argue against that. Murray was appearing on every game news outlet leading up to launch, talking up the game, how it was just infinite. The game was so big. Yeah, there's multiplayer, but the universe is so vast, you probably will never run into another player.
Can you run into other people, other players on the game?
Yes, but the chances of that are incredibly rare, just because of the size of what we're building.
Wow.
Cut to launch day, and two players are standing in the exact same spot simultaneously on streams, and wouldn't you know, they can't even see each other. Then the guy tweets out, "Oh, to be clear, this isn't a multiplayer game, don't forget." Like, what a joke. Then he talks about the most recent offender, of course, Cyberpunk 2077. And then came Cyberpunk, made by the guys that made Witcher 3, so this shit had to be good. Here's our Cyberpunk universe, and trust us, you can do fucking everything. Here, the entire CD Projekt Red PR department took all the cues from what worked from Molyneux and with Murray, and just went completely apeshit with it. Gamers were to believe this is sci-fi GTA in first person. What's not to love? Every video released by CD Projekt Red was carefully crafted to create a picture in players' minds that was just insanely compelling. They stopped just short of outright saying this thing would cure cancer. This strategy resulted in a sensational 8 million pre-orders. What happened then was this. He links to Beat 'em Up's Woods video on Cyberpunk, talking about various deceptive practices they had with the advertising and lead up to the game. The product was a fraction of what the developer hyped it up to be, and on top of that, it barely even ran on consoles that it was supposed to run, quote, surprisingly well on. He's of course referring to, I forgot who it was, a director or somebody that went on record saying that it ran surprisingly well on the Xbox One and PS4. And let me also say, from the perspective of a developer, all of this just sucks. Back in 2014, I remember some journalist from some big publication telling us that Ori almost got the cover of some magazine I read frequently, but ultimately they had to pick No Man's Sky because it was a bigger game. I kind of agreed, thinking to myself, okay, I get it, they have to promote the bigger game, they obviously have to go for the clicks. Sucks, but that's how the game is played. But then I really felt bamboozled once No Man's Sky came out, and it became clear that all this hype was really just built on lies, and the honest guy who just showed his actual product really got kicked in the balls because the lying guy was able to make up some tall tales that held absolutely no substance. This part really stood out to me, something I've never really even thought of that much with all these, overhyped, falsely advertised fake demo games. I mean, think about it. These much better games are getting overshadowed in, media coverage and that because of what these other games are promising. Let's think about Cyberpunk because that's the one that recently came out. How much attention did that broken mess take from other games releasing this past year that actually delivered what they promised and ended up being far superior products? I mean, seriously, we're talking dozens of big games that deserved the spotlight 1,000 times more than Cyberpunk did, and yet all the focus, all this free advertising gets done for Cyberpunk because they promise you the moon. So a lot of people thought this guy Mailer went too hard. He got a bunch of negative feedback, and sadly, he ended up apologizing for the whole thing. I personally thought it was great seeing someone who's an actual dev, a good one, come out and slam these practices of overhype, lies, manipulation, and massively under-delivering. Because, for one, when idiots like me call out these companies, one of the things defenders will always say, I mean, it never ceases to happen, is the tried and true, oh, well, you're not a developer, you don't know what goes into making a game, as if that's required to see the problem here. But this guy is the real deal. So, to these people who always say this, like, oh, you're not a real developer. Well, this guy's a real developer, saying the same shit I've been saying. So hopefully to at least those types of people, it means a bit more coming from someone like him. And I think a lot of people kind of proved his point in their reactions. He got the typical responses of, oh, well, they're working to make the games better. No Man's Sky, I saw a lot of people talking about, the improvements the game has made over the years. I mean, it released, 4 or 5 years ago? Oh, well, now it's a good game. Which, I always say, I do think that's a positive thing. When these people deliver half-assed products, I want them to at least try to make it, full-assed. And I'm not saying you shouldn't play them or enjoy them because of, the lies and, false advertising they did. But like I've been drilling with Cyberpunk lately, and I think it's easier to realize these things when you're in the midst of it rather than, years later, than like with No Man's Sky. Improving the game over time doesn't excuse all these lies and fake promises that you sold people on initially. Millions of players buy your game at launch, and it's nothing like you advertised. And what we're saying, as long as you make it better within a decade, everything's fine? I mean, that logic doesn't even make any sense to me. How many people bought the game full price at launch and are long done with it by now? I mean, even something like No Man's Sky, you want to say, oh, well, it's good now. Yeah, game came out years ago. I mean, how many of the people who bought it on launch day are still playing it today? Most people have moved on. Thousands of games have come out since then. And you got defenses like, oh, and the updates they're giving are free. They could have charged for them as paid DLC. Oh, yeah, how generous of them to not charge for new content added when, again, the launch version had about 10% of what they initially promised. Oh, be grateful. But yeah, I just wanted to point this out. I thought it was refreshing seeing an actual developer on a fairly notable series come out against this crap. But with that, this video's a wrap. Let me know your thoughts about this post in the comments. Do you think Mailer went too far, or is it time we stop accepting these practices? More so, because the game gets fixed, let's say, within a decade, does that make it all okay? Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed this discussion of the Ori developer just destroying some of these big overhyped games. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. And if you want to keep the conversation going, hit me up on Twitter at Johnny Zakari. And join my Discord, ChiGuy and Friends. Link to both in the description below. And as always, thanks for watching.